Hello, I'm Neil Dealey, co-founder and partner of Architects and Urban Planners Metropolitan Workshop. Welcome to Reshaped, a podcast series to mark our 15th year and to record perspectives on how the built environment is changing and needs to change in this historic moment. We asked leading thinkers and doers to respond to issues highlighted by the pandemic while we're in the throes of change, and memories and perspectives are fresh. Has the door opened to a new era? We think so. We might not know for 5 or 10 years what the long-term impact of the pandemic on our lives, towns and cities has been. Two schools of thought are contending to provide answers that planners, urban designers and everyone else might act on. One, that everything will return to normal once we're all vaccinated. And the other suggests that there will be a complete reset in how we live, work and travel, and therefore how we use our towns and cities. Our speaker in this episode speculates on which ideas from those two schools of thought might actually transpire, for better, for worse. He is Peter Bishop, Professor in Urban Design at the Bartlett School of Architecture, Faculty of the Built Environment, University College, London.
The question you asked me to speak about is how the pandemic will reshape our towns and cities. I suppose the simple answer to that is we haven't got a clue. There are a lot of people speculating about this, a lot of people writing about it, but we really don't know. And we won't know for 5 or 10 years when we have the chance to reflect on what actually has happened. There seem to be two schools of thought. The first is that we will just return to normal. Once we're all vaccinated and the pandemic is under control, then we'll just resume our lives as if nothing's ever happened, and we'll get back to how we used to live. The other extreme is that what we will see is a complete and fundamental reset in the ways in which we live, the ways in which we work, the ways in which we travel, and through that, the ways in which we use our towns and cities. I suspect that is neither of those and is somewhere in between. What you do see historically is that wars, pandemics, natural disasters, economic recessions don't fundamentally change or reset, but what they tend to do is amplify changes which are already happening. So let's look at some of these trends that have been happening over the last 10 or 15 years. Certainly one has been the rise of the global economy, and I don't think that is likely to change. It is not likely to change because of the impact of technology. And I think that what this pandemic has done is it has demonstrated that we don't need to necessarily interact in a particular geographical space with each other in order to live and to work and to exchange ideas. Flexible working has been happening really for the last 25 years. And over the last 15 years, that has intensified. People have already been tending to spend less time in the office and more time at home. You only have to look at the volume of people travelling by train or on the motorways on a Monday or a Friday or even a Thursday to realise that this flexible approach to place has been taking hold for a long time. And I think we will see more flexibility in work patterns. However, although a lot of people welcome that, and I think in a recent survey, 73% of people in this country said they're very happy working flexibly from home. Incidentally, quite different, far higher than in Holland, Germany, and France. I don't think that is sustainable. I think it's sustainable for two reasons. First of all, cities are about knowledge exchange. And if you work in the creative sector, at a broad definition of the creative sector includes finance and law and banking, as well as architecture and fashion, certainly includes education, certainly includes all the design industries and gaming and technology. Ultimately, you need that face-to-face contact. I think the big risk of what's happened in the pandemic has been that businesses have learnt that they don't actually need to have all of their workforce in one place at one time. And they're beginning to realize that with smart use of algorithms, they can offset a lot of the more routine business down to people working from home. And what I think you will see is a polarization of the lucky group who are able to come to work. Actually, commuting will be something you'll be rather proud of doing. And those condemned to live and work in isolation, normally people on low incomes, normally in poorer housing, normally remote, normally without access to colleagues. And for people at the beginning of their careers, the 18 to 35-year-olds, they'll lose that opportunity to impress, to pick up gossip, to go out for a drink with their colleagues and actually start to develop their networks and careers. So I think we could see a polarization with intense isolation to a large chunk of the service sector workforce. The other thing I think we have seen is a polarization of society. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. That's been happening over the last 15 years. That certainly seems to be happening during the pandemic. If you have a job, if you have a paid salary, you've been relatively well off. You may even have saved money. If you're working in the gig economy, you're probably now in absolutely dire straits, especially in the hospitality and the service sectors. And with it, we've seen an increased polarization of politics and society. This has been happening for a while, but the pandemic has intensified that as people have been plunged into isolation. And then finally, changes in leisure. I mean, a lot of people are desperate to get away, desperate to get out. So the repercussions, well, cities are robust. Cities are places of exchange of ideas. That's not going to change. They're places of chance encounters, and they are social places. I think they will adapt. I think the move towards mixed use and intensive neighborhoods will change. High streets and suburbs will reinvent themselves. I don't think city centres will die, but I think the idea of health and well-being and personal and communal space will be something that we take through into the way in which we redesign our cities. And we start to value quality over quantity. And finally, I think that the days of ultra-high density are over. I don't see the future as being suburban or living out in the countryside, but I think a recalibration of how our city centres work is probably long overdue. It has been happening gradually, and I think the pandemic will intensify that.
That was Peter Bishop. He argues that pandemics, natural disasters, or economic recessions do not tend to reset things. What they actually do is amplify what is already happening. He sees globalisation continuing, driven by technology. This has separated much economic activity from geography, but the new digital geography will continue to expand. And even though many of us apparently like the flexibility of working from home, he does not think current levels of enthusiasm will prove sustainable. There will be a return to cities as places of ideas and exchange, especially for those industries driven by any kind of creativity, law, teaching, and design, for example. Businesses will outsource to home workers every task they can to remain competitive, and that will mean further polarization between types of workers and perhaps intense isolation for some, particularly in the service sector. We've also seen political polarization because the rich have been getting richer and the poor poorer. If you have a salary and can work from home, you may have saved and got richer. If you work in the gig economy not so much. A recalibration of how we use our city centres driven by these trends, and maybe our politics, is long overdue, Peter argues. The pandemic has accelerated that imperative. Cities are robust and will adjust and assimilate, he thinks. One consequence of the pandemic he hopes for is that we will in the future value quality more than quantity. You can listen to other podcasts in the Reshape series at all the major providers, or go to our website network.co.uk. Series directed by Lee Mallet, produced by David Michon and Justina Green, recorded and edited by Sean Crook.